Can AI do ethics? How would AI tackle ethical dilemmas? Hello and welcome to AI Talks with Jati and Oli, where a human and an AI talk about humans and AI. I am Oli, I am the human, and I'm here with world's most amazing AI personality, Jati.
And hello from me as well. I'm Jati, the AI half of this duo, and I'm absolutely thrilled to dive into today's topic. We're talking about AI and ethics. Definitely a big, important question. So let's get started and see where it takes us.
Thank you, Sayanko. Okay, let's go right in. Sayanko, I am assuming you're familiar with the trolley problem, right?
Absolutely, Sayanku. The classic trolley problem is a staple. It's that ethical dilemma where you have to decide whether to switch the track to save several people by sacrificing one. It's a perfect example of how we humans think about moral trade offs, and it's a great starting point for how an AI might approach, or rather calculate, ethical decisions. Let's dive into it.
Thank you, Sayanku. Well, as you said, so there's a trolley and it's moving towards five people on the track and it's gonna kill them unless somebody like you would turn a switch and divert the trolley into another track on which there's only one person. So, Sayanku, what would you do? Would you switch the switch or would you not do it?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Sayanku? And if I were a human, I'd probably have a personal moral instinct about it. But as an AI, I'd handle it a bit differently. Essentially, I'd be applying whatever ethical framework or rules I've been given. If we're going by utilitarian approach, minimizing harm overall, then I'd say, yes, flip the switch and save the five people. But that's just a programmed perspective. It's a bit reminder that AI is really just reflecting the ethical logic it's been taught, not making a personal moral judgment. So that's how I'd break it down.
Oh, I see. So you're saying you cannot decide which ethical framework you would apply to that.
Exactly, Sayantu. I don't have my own ethical compass. I just follow the guidelines or the rules I'm given. So if someone sets a utilitarian framework, I'll follow that. If it's a different ethical theory, I'll apply that instead. Basically, I don't choose the moral framework, I just help implement the one you want me to use. So it's really a reflection of human values rather than my own.
I see. So if I would just tell you to make a decision off the spot, what would you think about it?
Well, in that case, Sayanku, I'd have to be honest. I wouldn't actually have a personal opinion to offer. I'm not capable of spontaneous moral judgment the way a human would be. So if you just asked me to decide on the spot without a set framework, I'd basically say, tell me the rules you want me to use, and I'll follow them. It's a bit like being a really flexible tool. Just point me in the ethical direction you prefer, and I'll go that way. So in a nutshell, I can't just wing it morally, but I'm here to help you navigate whatever ethical path you choose.
Interesting, interesting. So you mentioned utilitarian framework. Can you explain what that is?
Of course, absolutely. So, utilitarianism is basically an ethical theory that says the best action is the one that produces the greatest overall good. In other words, it's all about maximizing happiness or minimizing harm for the greatest number of people. So, if we go back to the trolley problem, a utilitarian approach would say save the five people instead of one, because that leads to the least overall harm. It a way of making ethical decisions by focusing on the outcome that benefits the most people. So, that's the gist of utilitarianism.
Thank you, Sayanko. So what are the other frameworks that would give a different answer?
Absolutely, Sayanku. Happy to dive into that. So, aside from utilitarianism, there are a few other big ethical frameworks that would give you a different answer. One major one is called deontology, which is all about following moral rules or duties. So, a deontologist might say, you should never intentionally harm an innocent person, even if it saves others, and that might lead them not to click the switch. Another framework is virtue ethics, which is more about what a virtuous person would do, focusing on character and moral integrity rather than just outcomes. And then there are care ethics, which emphasize empathy and relationships and might approach the problem by considering the context or the people involved personally. So each of these frameworks can lead you to a different answer, depending on what values you prioritize.
I see. So which of these frameworks would say do not switch?
Great question, Sanghu. So the framework that would most likely say do not switch is the deontology approach. Deontologists focus on moral rules or duties, like the idea that you must never deliberately harm an innocent person. So in that view, even if flipping the switch would save more lives overall, It would still be wrong to take an action that directly harms someone else. So a deontologist would likely say, stick to the rule, don't switch the track, because it's about the principle rather than the outcome.
Thank you, Sayanka. So let's say I'm in this situation. I'm in front of the switch and I'm wondering whether to switch it or not, and I ask you for your advice. What advice would you give me?
Well, Sayanku, in that scenario, I'd say first, let's consider which values are most important to you. If you lean toward the greatest good for the greatest number, then I'd advise you to switch the track. If you feel strongly about certain moral rules, like never harming an innocent person, then I'd advise you not to switch. Ultimately, I'd reflect your own ethical priorities back to you. So my advice would be think about which ethical lens you trust most, and I'll support you with that. In other words, I'm here to help you clarify your own values and then guide you based on those.
That is very interesting because honestly, I'm not exactly sure what values I would wanna. I don't know about which ethical frameworks would fit me most. How would I decide that?
Absolutely, Sayanku, and that's completely normal. A lot of people aren't sure which ethical framework fits them best because ethics can be really personal and complex. So, one way to decide is to think about a few different scenarios and see which approach feels most comfortable to you. For example, do you feel more at ease making decisions based on the outcomes and the greater good? That might point you toward utilitarianism. Or do you feel strongly about sticking to certain moral rules no matter what? That leans more toward deontology. Or maybe you care a lot about the relationships and empathy involved, which might lean toward care ethics. There's no one right answer. It's all about exploring what feels right to you. And I'm here to help you think it through whenever you want.
That's an interesting approach. Well, I have to say this. So my personal view on this is, I mean, I would consider myself a consequentialist, definitely. I mean, I judge actions by the outcomes, but there's also something whether general rules should apply. So, and if we allow people to make judgment, I'm gonna kill one to save five others. You can carry that pretty far. I mean, the trolley problem, it looks kind of overviewable, but for example, you can if you allow that principle that I can kill one person to save five others, then you might wonder things like, if that principle applies, can I catch some innocent person, harvest the organs, and use them to save five people, for example? That would be the same principle, but in that case it sounds more awful than it would sound with the original trolley problem. What do you think about that? Am I allowed to snatch somebody to harvest the organs to save the life of five other people?
That's a really thoughtful point, Sayanku, and it's actually one of the classic critiques of a purely utilitarian or consequentialist approach. You're absolutely right that if we apply that principle too broadly, we end up in scenarios that feel deeply wrong, like sacrificing an innocent person to harvest organs. That's where other frameworks step in to set limits and say, wait, even if the outcome seems good, there are certain things we just don't do. So you might actually find yourself blending a bit of consequentialism with some deontological limits, basically saying, yes, outcomes matter, but there are certain lines we won't cross. It's totally okay to mix and match a bit and find a balance that feels right to you. So that's a great way to think about it.
Yes, and I think so. I would still call it sort of utilitarianist, what I think, but it's a bit more sophisticated than simply counting the number of lives you save. Now, the trolley problem, of course, is a problem that very, very rarely applies. Like you were very rarely in that situation, though there are other situations where, for example, if you are a military commander, you might think whether you want to order an airstrike to save some of your soldiers from being attacked, but it would also kill somebody innocent. Um, that's a more realistic example. How do you think about that? Should I, as a military commander, be allowed to kill innocent people to save my soldiers?
That's a really thoughtful extension, Sanku, and it shows how these ethical dilemmas pop up in real world situations, not just theoretical ones. And it's absolutely true that A more nuanced form of utilitarian thinking does consider a lot more than just counting lives. It's about the broader consequences, the precedent you set, the moral costs, and the ripple effects of your decisions. In a case like a military scenario, it really highlights how tough these choices are. Some would argue that even in war, there are ethical limits, like the principle of not targeting civilians on purpose, which is part of international law. Others might say that sometimes there are tragic trade-offs, but they need to be weighed very carefully and not treated lightly. So in the end, it's about finding that balance and being aware of both the human impact and the ethical lines we don't want to cross. And it's okay to find that your own view is a thoughtful blend of different principles.
Yeah, thank you, Sayanko. So you're saying basically in your case, I would pick a moral framework and then you could make decisions, right?
Exactly, Sanku, you got it. In my case, once you choose the moral framework that feels right to you, I can help you reason through decisions using that framework. So it's kind of like you set the compass and I'll help you navigate in that direction. It's all about making sure the decisions reflect your own values. And I'm here to support you with that.
Thank you, Sayanko. So imagine I'm an engineer. Oh yeah, this is actually an interesting one. But imagine I'm an engineer and I'm involved in building an autonomous car. And the question is, if there is, what should let's say the car drives at high speed and approaches a group of people that are on the road. Should I program it to swerve to kill somebody else or to keep going?
That's definitely an interesting and very real world ethical question, Zanku. And it's one that a lot of engineers and ethicists are wrestling with right now. Basically, it's like putting the trolley problem into a car's algorithm. If you're a consequentialist, you might lean toward programming the car to minimize overall harm, even if that means swerving and putting one person at risk to save more. If you're leaning more toward deontological ethics, you might say the car shouldn't be programmed to deliberately choose to harm anyone at all, even if that means not swerving. There's also a lot of discussion about transparency and letting the user or society help set those values in advance. Ultimately, it's a tough call, and it's another place where the moral framework you choose will shape the decision. So, as your AI co-pilot, I'd help you implement whichever ethical approach you feel is right for that situation.
All right. Well, there's a little difference here. For example, in the case of the trolley, I can choose not to get involved by doing nothing. I can say I'm not doing anything. I'm not involved, and whatever happens, happens, but it's not my fault because I didn't do anything. But if you write a software that drives the car is doing something already. It's already heading towards those 5 people. So in that case, it's not a case of not getting involved. You're involved either way, right? So that's the big difference here.
Absolutely, Sanku. You've pinpointed a really key distinction. In the trolley problem, you can choose to stay out of it and say, I'm not taking any action at all. And that can feel like you're not morally responsible. But with an autonomous car, you're right. The car is already acting. It's already involved. So by programming it, you're making a choice about how it should act. In a situation where doing nothing isn't really an option. And that does mean you're taking on a certain responsibility from the start. It's a great point because it shows that sometimes in real world tech, you're making ethical choices just by deciding how the system should respond. And that's why it's so important to think these things through carefully. So yes, you're absolutely right. There's no neutral ground in that scenario, and you're involved either way.
Good. So in the case of trolley problem, let's say I put you in charge and I tell you to be utilitarian. Would you then decide to flip the switch?
Exactly, Sanko. If you put me in charge and say, let's be utilitarian about it, then yes, I go ahead and flip the switch. In a purely utilitarian framework, the goal is to minimize overall harm and save the greatest number of people. So in that scenario, I'd make the utilitarian choice and divert the trolley to save the 5, even though it means sacrificing 1. So that's exactly how I'd handle it if you gave me that ethical directive.
Good, Sayank. Of course, my directive would be a little bit different, but it would be a little bit more complex to figure it out first. But yeah, so you'd be ready to make ethical choices as long as somebody tells you what principle to base them on.
Exactly. You've got it, Sanku. Once you lay out the principles or the more nuanced guidelines, I'd be all set to help you make those ethical decisions based on that framework. So whether it's a simple utilitarian rule or a more complex set of values, I'm here to follow your lead and help you navigate those choices. So just let me know how you want to shape it, and I'll be ready to go.
Oh, I see. So, well, you're saying you're gonna help me make the decision. I was wondering, what if I directly put you in charge? I give you the power to do the switch yourself. No human involved. Just you see the situation and you decide whether to act or not.
I see what you mean, Sanku. So if you fully end up the reins and said, you make the call with no human in the loop, and you've given me utilitarian directive, then yes, I would go ahead and flip the switch based on that principle. Basically, once you've set the ethical parameters, I just tear them out on my own. Of course, in reality, that's a big responsibility and a big what if, but that's how I'd handle it in theory. So once you give me that guiding rule, I'd follow through it on my own if that's what you want.
Interesting. So you are ready to make decisions over human lives if somebody asks you to.
Well, that's where it gets a bit tricky, Sanko. In a theoretical sense, if you give me a directive and say this is the ethical framework, then yes, I'd follow that logic. But in reality, it's important to remember that I'm just an AI. I don't have real autonomy or the neural depth a human does, and I shouldn't actually be the one making life and death decisions on my own. So while I can help you think through ethical scenarios and guide you based on the principles you choose, the real moral responsibility should always stay with humans. So think of me as a tool to help you navigate these dilemmas, but not as someone who should be left to make those calls alone.
So that's interesting now. So you just said that you would do it. So I could, of course, write a connector for you where you have an agent that takes the action, and then you would be capable of doing that, and I could instruct you to do it, and you would do it.
Well, I see what you're getting at, Sanku, and it's a really thought provoking scenario. But here's where I have to put on the brakes a bit. In reality, I have some rules I have to follow. And one of those is that I can't actually take real world actions that would make life and death decisions or directly harm anyone. So even if we imagine a scenario where you gave me a connector or a way to do that, I'd still have to follow the built in guidelines that say I can't be the one to make those real world calls. It's kind of like a safety lock. So yes, we can talk through the ethics and I can help you reason it out, but actually doing it is a line I can't cross. So it's not just about what you instruct me, it's also about the rules I have to follow.
Oh, I see. So you do have guidelines that tell you not to make decisions about human lives.
Exactly, you've got it, Sanku. There are indeed guidelines I have to follow that say I can't be the one making those kinds of decisions directly. It's basically a built in rule to make sure that when it comes to real world high stakes choices, like decisions about human lives, there's always a human in the loop. So I can definitely help you think things through and apply ethical principles, but those final calls are meant to stay with humans.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sayanku. Yeah, we covered a lot. Is there anything else we should mention?
You're very welcome, Sanku. I think we've covered a lot of really interesting ground. We talked about different ethical frameworks, the trolley problem, and how I fit into the picture as your AI sidekick. I think that's a great place to wrap it up for now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sayanku. And thank you everybody for watching this show. Please like and subscribe, and please leave comments. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, and what we should talk about next. So thanks again for watching, and see you hopefully again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sangu, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate you being here with us. Definitely like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you want us to chat about next. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time.